Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Healing America's Narratives podcast. I'm your host, King. I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
Doing well, King. Always good to be with you here on Wednesday morning. Um, Looking forward to our conversation.
So am I. So what's your spiritual energy number this morning?
I'm at 10. I've Chip the cat on the ground here. I'm just behind me to my left, and hoping he'll just stay quiet and warm while we're talking.
I, I,
uh,
I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say kick the cat or
Chip,
chip?
yeah,
Okay.
Chip. We didn't name him. That's the name that his first owner, only owner before us, and she died, gave him. So he doesn't look like a Chip, but Chip is his name. So I got it. I shouldn't say it too loud because it might wake him up. Um, yeah, so I'm good. I'm showing up with 10, and I'm just getting ready, looking forward to getting going with you.
Well, I joined you as a 10. Feeling great. I always feel that some mornings when I may not feel a 10, which, since I've been on this um, day 42 into my 180-day journey, every day I wake up, it's been a 10 without having me go through my gratitude list. So just feeling a 10 based on that. And as I go into my gratitude list, I'm grateful for my life, my health, my ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have sound mind. Also grateful for another 24 hours to pursue my purpose in life. Grateful to continue to be on the journey to become fully human. 42 days into a 180-day journey of that. So I'm still continuing to reprogram my mind every day with my morning ritual. Now I have an evening ritual, and just really, really happy to be um, feeling the effects of making a decision and just being grateful. How about yourself?
Yeah. So as always, I'm grateful for indoor plumbing, food, fresh food for the most part in a refrigerator with regular electricity. Heat in the winter, which right now, when we've been through January and the first week of February, it's the coldest winter I remember in quite a while. We've haven't hit freezing for a while. We've been in the teens and single digits, occasionally below zero at night. And if it would get like to 35, I'd go outside and go swimming or something. It would just feel better. I'm exaggerating. But more seriously, all of my basic needs are met. Um, I get to do what I love for a living. I have friends and some family remaining whom I love and who love me. And yeah, I mean, I'm just as grateful for this life and for relatively good health, even though the body is showing some of the wear of midway through its 72nd year. And but across the board, I'm very fortunate and grateful for that.
All right. Well, before we get started, tell me something good.
Yeah. So I happen to be. Usually, you can't see what I'm wearing. Usually, but because of the camera issue, I have on the sweatshirt that says St. John's. That's my undergraduate alma mater, St. John's University, out of Queens. And just on a really relative small scale, they're currently in second place in the Big East with a 10-1 record in the Big East. And this Friday night they'll play UConn, which is in first place in the Big East with an 11, I believe, an 11-0 or 10-0 record. Um, and so it'll be a good game at Madison Square Garden on Friday night. I'm looking forward to it. I don't watch a lot of live television, but I make some exceptions this time of year for college basketball. And yeah, it's a good thing for me. It's just fun. I graduated from there. In fact, 50 years ago this year. So it's my, so it's
50th anniversary, huh?
yeah, I graduated in May of 1976,
Okay.
and so it was good. Last night they beat a really tough and good defensive team in DePaul University, who are in the middle of rebuilding after the last couple of years. They have a great coach and some really hard-nosed players. So it was a good win last night, and I enjoy the wins because I mean I coached high school basketball for some years, and there, very few teams go through a season without any losses. So you enjoy the wins and you enjoy them when they play hard. And so for me, that was good. I enjoyed the game last night.
Okay, excellent, excellent. All right. Well, we already start the show. You ready to walk us into our topic for today's discussion?
Yeah. So I want to take a look at two specific concepts, which I actually refer to as myths sometimes. And those are control and security. And what I mean by that, that on a relative basis, there are some things that we can control, some small things that we can control. Right now I can control if I want to be on this call with you. You can control if you want to be on with me, and either one of us can just click leave and we can stop. So we have some control over things like that. We have relative security. For the most part, I'm sitting in this moment. I'm sitting, speaking with you with some heat on a cold day in the Northeast. My health is relatively good, but in any given moment, I don't know exactly what's going on inside of my body. So in any given moment, something could happen that I don't even know anything about and completely change my life. So generally speaking, the idea of being in control beyond any immediate relative realm is kind of mythical. And the idea of having any real security is mythical. You can ask, people living in Minneapolis right now, not just Minneapolis, but a lot of different places right now. People living in Ukraine, people living, what's left of the people in Gaza. So we want to talk about in the context of healing America's narratives in this country, that the people who have control, and they do in some ways, and who feel secure in what they're doing, and they are in some ways, are more really living in some larger myths, because they only have security and are in control until a bigger guy comes down the street or an unknown event happens in their physical body, or they're surprised at the power of the people, as in we the people of the United States, as opposed to the power of federal police force in our cities. So I want to get into that on whatever direction we want to go in, because there are lots of ways we can talk about the myths of security and control, and just go from there.
Well, yeah, I think it's a good topic, but just to make sure I'm clear, give me an example of which direction you're leaning in based off that.
An example of what I mean by security and control, or
yes, that you want to just kind of frame our discussion in.
All right, so I'll give a couple of personal examples. When I was younger, I was into sports. I was into athletics, and the thing I was best at was middle and long distance running. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to play basketball. But I took pride in being in shape and being athletic. I played as an adult. I played softball. I ran in road races. I played pickup basketball in some leagues, and I felt like I was in control of my body, and I felt pretty secure in my body. Not in terms of walking down the street at night and winning fights, because I was never more than 5'6" and 135 pounds. So it wasn't that kind of control and security, but just comfortable in my own body. And I started having some vague pain, probably in my late 30s. Didn't know what it was. Thought it was tight muscles. Long story short, I found out that the cartilage in both my hips was virtually gone by the time I was in my mid 40s. I had this general pain, this kind of subtle pain, and by the time I was 47 years old, I was a prime candidate for total hip replacement. So I didn't have any control of that. I thought I did. I thought I was in control of my body. And meanwhile, what I had done as a younger man, between the ages of 16 and 19, really, had damaged both my hips and fortunately not my spine or my neck or my knees in a irreparable way. Reparable only by replacing the joints. So that's one. When she was 55, my sister, Anne Marie, took her own life. And that was for me a lesson in both a sense of security and control, because I was in the process of helping her after she went through some difficulties, and in helping her to find some control through these difficulties and a sense of security so she could go on. And I actually found her in her home about 6 hours after she died at her own hand. And I had no control over that. And I had been unable to give her any real sense of security to keep on going. So, those are two really personal ones. But on a larger scale, and I think about this when this winter now, I don't have to drive a lot in snowy and icy conditions, but I do sometimes drive in snowy and icy conditions. And many of the roads that are not interstates up here are double yellow line, 2-lane highways where the speed limit is 55 usually. And at any given moment, somebody could lose control, the idea of control and security. If somebody loses control of their car and comes across the double line, I have no control over that, and I'm not really secure. And there are other examples, but so those are two very personal examples. And one big example historically, in the late 90s and the very early 2000s, the United States thought of itself as a nation that was secure because of its military and its intelligence agencies, and in control because it was by far the most powerful nation on the planet in terms of both wealth and military power. And on September 11th, 2001, due to failures of intelligence and failures of law enforcement to communicate with each other, but mainly of national intelligence, 19 young men from Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, and one other country I'm forgetting, hijacked 4 planes, piloted them into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and one got crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. And America learned that it was neither in control as it thought it was, nor particularly secure. So that's on a bigger scale. So any kind of ultimate control and any kind of ultimate security are myths. I'll just period. So there's a big example nationally and a couple of smaller personal examples.
Well, again, I want to give you gratitude for choosing a timely and definitely relevant and important topic. And I want to talk about what I actually looked at as how politically, we had the illusion of choice. And I'm going to talk specifically from the national, presidential, and congressional level elections. And I say the illusion of choice. What I mean by that is the fact that we're given the choice between what I like to say, I liken it to the carrot or the stick. And basically, the carrot being the Republican Party. I'm sorry, the stick being the Republican Party. They hit you, they're violent, they're going to get their agenda across no matter what, no matter who it impacts, no matter who it hurts. That's who the Republican Party leans on. So we can choose between them or the carrot, which is Democrats who say, well, we're not going to be so cruel. It's wrong to hit people with sticks. We're not going to do that. That's just not right. And I'm liking the Democrats to their philosophy is, I have empathy, I understand, but their policies are likened to coming up with band-aids for AIDS patients, homeless AIDS patients. You see them on the street and say, okay, we are the homeless population that have AIDS or have several wounds, and we want to deal with these wounds. So the best way to deal with these wounds, we're going to put a national band-aid campaign to get every homeless person out there with AIDS a band-aid. And that's how we're going to help deal with them. And so they're going to run that platform. And people say, wow, that's so caring and community oriented. And then 4 years later, another Democratic politician comes along and says, well, we keep finding all these band-aids in the streets that homeless people turn off, and that's becoming a health hazard because they may have all kind of diseases and all those things. So we got to stop the band-aid program. And so that's how I look at that. It's like neither one is going to really change things. One is definitely far worse than the other, as we see with the Republican Party right now and what Trump's administration is doing with that. But then, like I said, the Democrats are basis, and let's get back to status quo. Let's get back to the point where we were before. So that to me is the illusion of choice, where we think we can control who we put in office, but the outcome will always still be the same. There still will be 99%. We'll still be 99%, and the 1% that run the country or run the world will still run the world. And I'll call that delusion of choice, because we think if we find the right person who's charismatic and community oriented and has emotional intelligence, that they will come along and actually bring forth and usher a new change of love and justice in the world. And I don't believe it's going to happen. I don't think our system is designed that. I think the system that governs our behaviors, the white supremacist system that governs us, won't allow it. And it's not in their best interest to allow it. So we'll always be divisive, and they're going to spur divisiveness in that, because the way we get it, the way we deal with that fact that we don't, when we accept, when we have the realization, I should say, when it comes along that we don't have the choice, then people feel helpless and they get angry. And the best way to deal with folks who are in that state, instead of coming at the system, is to throw someone else out there to say, well, no, don't be angry at me, be angry at this immigrant, be angry at this other minority, be angry at this uh, person over here that's draining the welfare system. That's who you need to divert your anger, your attention at. And so, and that's what keeps us where we are right now, constantly fighting one another, uh, hoping and praying from the media that the Epstein files are what brings this administration down, but we still don't know if it will be. Even though they can still say, well, we're only going to release 3 million and it's supposed to be 6 million. I can't believe Epstein was so diligent. Millions and millions of files. I mean, that's like he was in the business of blackmail. That was his business. The pedophile was just a benefit on top of in the business of blackmail. They don't have millions of files, but you know, but again, the control, the myth that you talk about is that people think that you have control over your what you feed your mind. And the algorithms have control over what you get, information you get fed. If you watching, if you're getting your news from either YouTube or Facebook or any of the major social media sites, they're giving you algorithms, so you don't have choice there. I mean, you do in a certain way because it's based off what you clicked on, but the goal behind the algorithm is to keep you scrolling. So the choice of thinking you can just go in there for a few minutes and get off is not really in your control unless you intentionally set that as your goal. But if you just passively turn your phone on, you can be there for hours before you even realize it's been hours and you just haven't got anything done, but just look at people scrolling and comments and people's comments about the political situation, which doesn't change. But everybody has comments, everybody has energy. So for me, I'm kind of in that space when we talk about control. That's what comes to my mind, top of mind, the myth of control, that you have the freedom to choose your thoughts in your day when you really don't. Um, Again, unless you totally become a critical thinker and make that choice. But what I'm saying is the majority of people don't. They don't know who they vote for, why they're voting for certain people. Just they're being told vote for this person because that person is worse. So that's why you vote for them, regardless of whatever else they're running on. They're just not as bad as that person over there. So that's why you vote. So that's my first take on.
Yeah, and I'm just really glad that last piece that you added that on. You said unless people choose to become a critical thinker, and then you can exercise a bit more control, and that's the basis of somebody that you and I have quoted in the past. Viktor Frankl's one of his most famous quotes from Man's Search for Meaning is everything can be taken except for the final human freedom, the freedom to choose one's response or attitude in any given set of circumstances. And he wrote that. This is not a joke as I'm about to say this, but he wrote that before social media, before the ubiquitous screens that we live with and in now. And I want to just piggyback on what you said. You and I have for the last 3+ years used a shorthand of development. So we speak about the different of growing from a me-centric view to an us-centric view, group-centric, to an all-of-us-centric view. So all humans, I care about all humans, and then to an all-that-is-centric view. I care about the universe or creation or the planet, however you want to say it. And that's a shorthand that's consistent with most developmental research. But what we're speaking about specifically, when you mentioned critical thinking and having control, I want to just go back to one of the foundational developmental researchers, Robert Keegan from Harvard University. And he speaks about basically 5 levels of mind. And first two, I'll say, but I'll focus on the second, third, and fourth. So the first one is the impulsive mind, and that's kind of like an infant. Like it's like you're a reptile. You just respond to the universe. You're not really in control of anything. You poop, you pee, you vomit, you cry, and you need somebody there to help you. So that's just impulsive. And as you get a little bit older, as you get into toddlerhood, they grow into what he calls the imperial mind, where you think everything is about you, and that's me-centric. But then the two where the one where most adults live, most of the adults that we know live, or that we see know, is the socialized mind. We live within the constraints of what I call cultural givens, what society and the culture give us. We don't, as like we'd like to say, artists, think outside of the box. And that became really popular to say in the corporate world. We need people who think outside the box. And truth be told, we needed to get rid of the box entirely, not just think outside of it for a while. But this socialized mind, to your point, doesn't really have a lot of control because it's governed by society and culture, what comes in. The next level of development that Keegan identifies is called, and the language is so very clear, maybe even perfect. You move from a socialized mind to a self-authoring mind. So you author your own view of the world. You begin to act independently. You can see society and culture for what it is. And you can say, okay, that part makes sense to me, but this part doesn't. And you begin to pick and choose. You begin to put your focus in certain places. So you're able to really write your own life, to write and live your own life, to self-author. And there's one more beyond that where very few people live. I'll just mention it. It's a self-transcending mind, where you're able to even step outside of your self-authoring self, see it, and transcend it. And that gets into the realm of transpersonal spirituality and living on a different plane where people like, maybe the Dalai Lama, the late Thich Nhat Hanh and some other spiritual teachers live. But within the socialized mind, which is where the vast majority of Americans live, there are, I say vast majority, it's probably 60 to 70 something percent. There is a 20 to 25% people who are self-authoring or higher, but they don't have a lot of power. The power exists in the socialized mind. Even someone like Donald Trump, who seems like he's self-authoring, he's really not. He's earlier than socialized mind. he's really living with an impulsive and imperial mind. He has no impulse control. He says and does what he wants to say and do, and he thinks it's all about him. Those are Keegan's first two levels of development. Right? I just respond to whatever I want right now, and I think everything is about me. That's the imperial mind. So it's easy to confuse somebody who has an imperial mind, right, thinking it's just about them, with somebody who has a self-authoring mind, who has learned, who has gone through socialization, has begun to see socialization for what it is, and begins to self-author. So it's very, very different. All that to say, a lot of very intelligent people who can argue well, who can learn a lot of facts, and who can win debates are operating through a socialized mind still, because they're arguing about, and they only have the facts of the socialization that they've been exposed to. And that's true on the left and the right. The difference being, as you alluded to, is if you look at, I don't even like using the left and the right because they're just such sweeping generalizations. But if you look at the history of conservatism and progressivism, you could say, we have made the progress we've made in this country. We're not done, but we have an end of slavery. We have an end of Jim Crow. We have women's rights. We have gay rights. We're working on bi and trans rights. All of that came from progressives who saw the value and the dignity of all human beings, regardless of, and when you say all human beings, you shouldn't have to say regardless of, but in this country we do, but regardless of skin pigmentation, gender, sexual orientation, religion, etc. Conservatives in any era, and that's ERA, not ERROR, in case my New York language is not clear, resisted that every step of the way. And because the Democratic and Republican parties over the history of the country have shifted from conservatism to progressivism, we have to be really careful about how we use the language. In the early 60s, basically with Lyndon Johnson and the civil rights movement, and I should say with Dr. King and the civil rights movement and the impact they had on Lyndon Johnson, Johnson was a Southern Democrat. And when he passed and signed into law the Civil Rights Act in 64 and the Voting Rights Act in 65, a significant number of Southern Democrats, which was the white supremacy party, the party of slavery back in the 1860s, left the Democratic Party for the Republican Party. And the Republican Party became the more conservative white supremacist party. Not to call every Republican a white supremacist, I'm not doing that, but that's how they shifted. So while both sides have some socialization, the current iteration of the Democratic Party, or the last 60 years of the Democratic Party, has been the party of working for equal rights for everybody and to get everybody eligible to vote. And the Republican Party has fought against that, making up stories about voter fraud when really they practice voter suppression. So summarize all of that. Both parties have their socialization. There aren't a lot of people in either party who really have a self-authoring or self-transcendent mind, although there are some individuals who do, I believe. But the current Republican Party that's in power is working hard to restrict the rights of individual, middle income, lower income American citizens in favor of giving power and transferring more wealth to the already uber wealthy. And even they, I think, are finding out slowly but surely. I mean, the wealthy, powerful people, the Trumps and Musks and those who are in their coattails, the Bondis and Millers and Gnomes and others, are beginning to find out that the thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions or tens of millions of ordinary Americans, when they get together, can create some pretty powerful um, challenges to the control and the security that the minority at the top think they have. I know that was a lot, but I'll stop there.
Well, I agree with you, what you laid out, definitely in Keegan's work about the socialized mind. And the media plays such a huge role in continuing the, I would say, manufacturing consent to the socialized mind, that they throw out these terms that most people who vote don't even understand what they mean. And not only do they not understand what they mean, they really have no relevance when it goes to the voting booth. And what do I mean by that? When you begin to talk about the difference between progressive versus moderate versus um, conservative Democrat, or mega versus right wing versus moderate versus conservative Republican, they throw out these different subcategories within that, as though people understand what that means. When you go to the voting booth, you don't look for moderate conservative, moderate Democrat, progressive Democrat. You look at Democrat, you look at Republican. So to me, now again, I understand intellectually what those labels mean and why they're differentiating and categorizing people into subcategories within a party. But you would think that the Democrats are really about bringing back the change they advocate, at least they preach about, it would be, let's get rid of all the ambiguity around what we stand on. And let's come out as a united party and stop all this trying to determine are we progressive, are we conservative. We are at a crisis, is what they should be saying. And so now the strategy has to be more consistent. We have to be more in line with what we're talking about in our messaging and how we move. And we're not seeing that. We're seeing the same thing that we saw before. And like I said, at the end of the day, it seems like, well, other than Madani, what he did in New York, he came with some radical policies. And that's what, to me, they have to come with. You got to come with policies. The Republicans hate you anyway. They don't call you left winging, communist, woke anyway. So it's not like if you come out not woke, quote unquote, by their definition, you're going to get viewed better and with more respect in their eyes. You're not. And if you do, why would you want their respect? It's like, I don't want Jeffrey Epstein, if he was still alive, I don't want his respect. He's a pedophile. So I'm not looking to get his respect. So I don't see why the Democrats are looking to have some kind of moral um, consistency as it relates to how the Republicans operate. They operate, like I said, by the stick. By any means necessary, we're going to enact our agenda and our basis, even if it means lying. We don't care. We don't have, you can't shame us. Republicans can't be shamed. You can't call us hypocrites because they're going to do whatever it takes for them to win. We see Donald Trump has shown that's how the culture, he established a culture of the Republican Party. And he just lies when he feel like lying. He never admits to anything. He clearly come out one breath say, I'm the smartest person. I know everything better than anyone ever existed. He'll say that in one breath, and next breath, ask him about the Epstein files. I don't know anything about that. Or ask him about the Saudi princess buying into his Bitcoin, his son's own. I don't know anything about that. So it's like, but no one ever catches him on it. No one ever calls him on it. And if he does get caught on a little lie, then he attacks the reporter personally and gets away with that. Instead of all the other reporters in the room, like, no, we're not letting you get away with that. You're going to just shut this conference down because we're not going to let you just sit here and just belittle her like that. We're not going to let that be how you answer your questions, and it just becomes a soundbite tonight's news. We're all going to keep repeating the same question until you shut the press conference down. And then you create the atmosphere where you no longer do press conferences anymore. I'd rather have it be that way than to have him continue to just do what he does. And it's like, he's like the big bully, and everybody's just like little kids hovering around after school complaining that he took our lunch money too. He took mine. I don't know where we're going to eat the rest of the day. And that's how the world responds to Trump. Like there is no consequences that we can do, and there are. And so I say all that to say, now that's because it's coming under the, as you say, socialized mind. The socialized mind is putting people in that feeling of powerlessness, of hopelessness, of, and in case you had a little bit of hope, let me throw in some more violence in your local news and show you that there's local crimes happening and somebody's getting robbed or carjacked. So focus on that. So we don't want you to have any kind of feeling of joy in your day because you can't watch the news and get any kind of joy out of it at all. It's always going to be despair, um, anger, confusion, divisiveness. Here's the people you're supposed to hate. Um, so now we have to find comfort in watching comedians like Jon Stewart, or if you're on the left side, Jimmy Kimmel, who can articulate what we're seeing in a funny, joking way, and at least gives us some kind of, we can laugh about it at the end of the day, but it doesn't change the state. It's like I call it intellectual masturbation. It feels good, but it doesn't produce life. It's not going to produce change. It's just going to continually keep happening over and over again. And that's what I found myself consistently caught up in, that socialized, um, as we say, the socialized construct. I want to frame it as government and manufacturing our consent and manufacture what's important to us. Because what I realized at the end of the day, if you don't control your thoughts, meaning you choose what you feed your mind, then you choose how you apply that in your mind and how that's going to be applied through your day and how that's going to affect your energy levels, then you are just active victim in the wheels of the media to pull and play you like a puppet, just pulling strings, and you're reacting and responding to the movements of the strings they're pulling. And that's why most people don't realize there's so much anxiety, so much stress, so much confusion, and then you're not forced, but then you're led to, well, just have alcohol as a way to deal with it, or watch the sporting game. This Super Bowl coming up, that'll give you something to focus on for 4 hours, to get your mind off all the confusion, all the divisiveness, all the low energy things happening outside of that. You at least get riled up about the Super Bowl, invite your friends by, and now you get 4 hours to escape it for a second until the next sporting event or to the next big thing. So that's why I really believe it's now more imperative. Again, I can't speak for anyone else. I can only speak for myself, that I intentionally chose to control my algorithm, control what I feed my mind. And I'm telling you from the experience of being 42 days into this practice that is liberating. I'm truly vibrating, I believe, at a higher frequency. I don't know if I'm vibrating at the frequency of 500 hertz yet because I've never been there. So I can't really equate it, but I can say I'm definitely vibrating higher than I've ever vibrated before. And as a result, I'm looking at the world differently. I'm seeing things completely different than I did before. And I know that's because of what I'm feeding my mind. And again, I close with this. If there's nothing else you get from this show, you have to control that beginning part of your morning when you first wake up, and you have to control that last 30 minutes of your night before you go to bed. If you don't control any other parts of your day, you have to control those, because if you don't, if you leave those to a passive mindset of, I'm just going to put the TV on until I go to sleep, or I'm going to wake up off my alarm clock and let the news just hit me as soon as I start to get consciousness aware, then you'll fall for anything. And most people do, like believing that woke, whether how you define woke, to believe that woke is a bad thing, to be awake is a bad thing, that it's best to be, it's smarter to be sleep, uh, unawake, unconscious is a better choice to make. If you really think about just the logics behind that, it's just insanity to me.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and especially that last piece, something that you and I have dissected in the past. So two things, two specific current examples come up as we're in this conversation around control and security, um, and the idea of the Democrats, you mentioned, they need to come up with some kind of a unified idea or platform. So I don't know if it was today's or yesterday's New York Times, Thomas Edsall, Edsall, who writes a weekly column for the Times, a very thoughtful, well-informed man in my reading of him over the years. He's been around for a while. And he wrote a column, which I saw for the first time this morning, but I forget if it was dated yesterday or not. And it's just called Project 2028. And I admire his courage for doing this. And in it, he basically says, if the Democrats have any chance of taking back, Congress and the Senate, or one or the other in 2026, but especially the White House in 2028, they need, as you said, a unified message that really speaks to the people of this country. And he broke it down into various categories, which I'm not going to try to repeat here. But what he did before he published this was he contacted a lot of scholars in various areas: economics, developmental psychology, gender issues, history, and he got their input first. So it wasn't just going based on what he thought. And so he put it out there, and this is a risky thing to do. The New York Times, for the most part, the comment section is, if not always, it's one of the safer places to write comments. It's not like X, or the Washington Post comment section is like X. It's just a free for all. But he basically said to his readers, let me know what you think. Tell me what you think I'm missing. Because he said, this is the beginning of a process. So he put it out there. So that was a really brave thing to do. And because of who he is, people responded from a sense of decency. And the Democrats really need it. They really need something like that. And he's getting input from, average readers of the New York Times. So that's one. Also, way below the fold, and something that the Trump administration, it's not going to appear on the White House website, but it's becoming increasingly clear that Trump is withdrawing his attempts to extort cash from Harvard University. Remember, he basically tried to challenge a lot of universities, Columbia, most famously, Brown, I forget all of them, but he really went after Harvard, and Harvard has the wherewithal to fight back, and did, and has, and it looks as though that Trump backed down. So Harvard didn't, to stay with this idea of security and control, Harvard wasn't secure enough that Trump wouldn't go after them. They couldn't control his behavior. And what he did hurt them, because they had to spend millions of dollars on attorney fees that could have been spent elsewhere, because they're an educational institution. But they learned that in this one container, this one attack by the President of the United States and his federal government, that they had this relative sense of control, that by fighting back, he would stop what he's doing. So again, could they control him in the big picture of preventing him from starting this? No. Were they secure against the aggression of the federal government? No. If they fought back intelligently and strategically, and they probably have more intelligent and strategic lawyers than Trump does, since everybody who was any good in the Department of Justice and in the upper echelons of the federal government beyond the Department of Justice, most of the good people are gone. There probably are some left. So there is this relative control, but there's no absolute control. That's my point.
Well, I'm sorry, were you done?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what I would say that is what I wanted to bring in deep perspective. Last week you challenged me, and I have since then created a graphic that talks about what I'm about to allude to right now, what I consider to be the 8 energies that I believe are human emergence that we have. And again, this is my framework. I think in frameworks, so I'm always going to come up with different frameworks to help me understand things and how I use this, and I will explain this to assess where I am, and it helps me move more deliberate, more intentionally and deliberately toward my purpose and my goals as a result. So basically what I came up with, and they kind of go in order, and I'm still building this. So this may change down the road as I get more experience and learn more. But right now, I'm saying the 8 generative energy forms are: number one is your physical energy. Again, we all know what that means, and that dwindles as you get older. You have more when you're in your youth, and it goes away as you get older. Just based on age. Uh, then you have your mental energy. Now you want to protect that, because again, that's going to be what you feed your mind, and then your mental overall well-being as a result of what you're feeding your mind. And see, the point I'm making is that you have to determine what's on a daily basis in all your actions and behaviors, what is draining your energy in these 8 areas, and what is increasing your energy in these 8 areas. And you want to stop, obviously, doing the things, or disassociate yourself from the people who are draining your energy in these areas, and of course, increase the activities that are increasing your energy in these areas. So then you have spiritual energy. The spiritual energy is your religious dogma, with how you connect to the universe, how you connect with nature, how you see that. Does it lift you up? Do you feel connected in that context, regardless of whatever dogma you practice? Then you have love energy, your relationships. Love energy is your act of kindness, your ability to serve. Your wisdom energy, obviously, is the mistakes you've learned from your life, or either from the mistakes you've learned from your own personal life, or mistakes you learned from other people. But you got to increase that wisdom energy. And the thing about 1 and 5 is that when you're young, you don't have a lot of wisdom energy because you haven't experienced a lot yet. And by the time you get older in our age, you have a lot of wisdom experience, more than you have physical energy. So they kind of go opposite of each other. Then you have your emotional energy, and that's the energy that allows you to control your anger and all your emotions, sadness, fear, things of that nature. And if you don't control that, and a lot of people don't have control over their emotional energy, that can lead to grave consequences. Fights, arguments, somebody either getting shot or someone getting shot at, because of people can't control their emotional energy. And then you have your soul energy, which is your essence. And then all these energies, that previous 6, impact your soul energy, because now that's going to be how you sit with yourself, and how you feel about yourself, and how do you feel in line with your purpose, and those things. And then finally, number 8 is your generative energy. So all the other 7 were your spiritual kind of abstract energies, where your generative now is how you putting that into action and what you're doing. And so I share this because now what I'm saying is, when you start taking in information and data that we get, whether it's from social media, whether it's from friends, from the radio, whether it's a TV, that's data entering into our consciousness. And as we understand from Einstein, energy is everything, and everything is energy. And once you understand that, and you understand your mind and your body is constantly transmitting and receiving energy and data in all forms, and that has an impact on how you feel psychologically. All those things have an impact on how you operate and how you see the world. Like, you can wake up in the morning feeling great, watch the news, get hopeless, and now your energy has decreased mentally, spiritually, emotionally, as a result of what you saw in the news. Because now you're feeling hopeless, you're feeling confused, you're feeling indecisive about how you want to pursue your day. I can imagine how people who work for the government are feeling right now, for folks who still do work there, and dealing with the uncertainty on a daily basis of not knowing whether you're going to get fired, and how that's going to impact you, because you've not invested 20 plus years in the government. That's your career. So now you're 40 years old plus, and getting out in the idea of having to get out here in the job market and compete with other people is I'm sure full of anxiety. That's causing a drainage on you, and that's going to have an impact. So that's why I say it's so important to protect your mind and protect your essence, so that you don't have energy drainage, you have energy increase. And then the last thing I'll say as a wrap up this section is this. So now when you add the racial component to it, within the racial construct, whether it's black or whether it's white, there's a 50%. Again, this is me saying this. I don't really need, I would say, academics to validate this for me. It works in my life and it helps me navigate. And I'm sharing this with you all. You can do it as you please. But when you add the racial component to it, if it's blacks, you're dealing with the victimization of trying to prove that you're better, that you are not what they say you are, as far as being a thug and being a low life, and having our government tell you that anything that shows of you or your ancestors have done of anything of value is considered woke and not something that they actually earned, but they was only given that because of the color of their skin. So you got to deal with that energy hemorrhage when you fight that on a daily basis. Then if you're white, you're dealing with the energy hemorrhages of, first of all, you got to show pride in your race, or you consider to be a sellout, or you're dealing with the fact of denying the fact that you're not racist, and that's an energy hemorrhage, because now you got to try to live up to what your ancestors did that you're not responsible for, but you're accountable for. So that's the energy hemorrhage they're dealing with as a result of this whole racial construct thing. And at the end of the day, you're fighting that daily battle of, am I increasing my energy in these 8 areas, or am my energy decreasing in these 8 areas? And that's going to determine how you pretty much move through your life. And hopefully this gives some people some insight.
Yeah, so I love that. Leave that up there just for a second, because we don't really have time to get into it. This is kind of like your Thomas Edsel moment. You're putting this up there for people to see and get some feedback on it. But so, because there's a lot, I have a bunch of questions, but we don't have really time to get into them in terms of the order of these things and some of the differences. So you and I can do that privately, and maybe, because I do have some questions about it. But I like I agree with the general idea of it. This idea of being able to recognize your energy, which energy it is, and when you have more or less of it in life in terms of chronology and aging. But I'll withhold making specific comments because it's just we don't have time to do it. We're about 7.5 minutes from ending here. But thanks for sharing that. I do like it. I'll take you to task for the order of it when we talk. No, I'm just kidding. When I say take you to task, I just have some questions.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that. Probably time for us to begin to go into offering folks a way to move forward from this conversation.
Absolutely, by all means.
Yeah. So the illusions of control and security. So this could be as simple as, I'm going to date myself when I say this. You can obviously do it online on a word processing document on Word or whatever you happen to use. But you can take a notebook or a legal pad, draw a line down the middle, put on the top of one page control, and on one side of the page put, I have control. On the other side, I don't have control. And just list the things in your life that you really think you're in control of, and list the things that you admit that you really don't have any control over. Do the same thing, not the same thing, with security. Put the word security on the top. On one side, I'm secure. On the other side, not so much. And just list the things that you feel very secure in, and list the things that you feel either not so secure or insecure in or about. And then share those 2 pages. Maybe do this with a partner. I'm making this up, so I'll have some retroactive comments as I do it. Maybe do this with a partner. You do your version, your partner does the other version. And when I say partner, I don't mean your spouse or anything. Could be, but anybody that you know. Compare them and provide each other feedback. So the questions, I imagine, would go something like this. Well, you think you're in control of X. How do you control X day to day, really? Or you say you don't have any security around Y. Well, what about this? Don't you have? So just get a real sense of security and control in your own life. And my guess is, my projection onto you and to myself, is that you'll find that there are some things you have relative control over, and they're relatively small and contained. Again, I joked earlier that you or I could, can control whether we stay on this podcast together for this full hour. Either one of us could just decide to leave when we want. That's control. How important is it in the overall scheme of life and the universe? Probably not so important. But just to get a real sense of what you really have control over in the largest picture of your life, and where you're really secure in the largest picture of your life. And just see that and see what really is kind of myth and what is real. It's worth having a sense of that. So I'll put a period there.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Reggie. And I agree wholeheartedly that those are excellent steps and suggestions that we can use to kind of give some form of control, some starting point, and to put you on the road to critical thinking, and why that's so important in today's time. So now we're going to move into the last section of our show, which we highlight and lift up people who have exhibited the fully human characteristics that either from the past that we have patterned our lives after and have influenced us, or folks that are currently doing it now that we want to lift up and give flowers to. And so with that being said, I'm going to go with my first one, or should I say my pick today. I've said them before, but again, my goal is to constantly keep highlighting my ancestors, our ancestors, if you choose to accept them as well. He's not just my personal ancestor, he's our collective ancestor as human beings, and that's Che Guevara. And I said them before, and I wanted to share with you all what I came up with again in thinking in frameworks, that I believe there are 6 core pillars. I call them the 6 mastery pillars, identify how people comprise to be their full humanity. And it helps me understand how to evaluate myself and my lift up to these 6 standards, as well as people I connect with and bring into my world, to my life. So we start off with identity. I give him a 10 out of 10. He evolved from a medical student to a revolutionary architect. His growth mindset, he continuously adapted from guerrilla warfare to economic theory, treating failures as data, not defeat. He had a higher purpose for what he did with his life. He operated from a non-negotiable commitment to global liberation and the dismantling of imperial systems. He had a grateful spirit, maintained gratitude for solidarity and collective struggle, governing principles. He lived by a strict internal code, equality, sacrifice, and a new human discipline. And then finally, his self-awareness, which I believe was just so profound, because not only did when they had won liberation for Cuba and he was operating within a cabinet position, he realized that wasn't his strength. He realized that wasn't the best interest of the people for him to remain in some cabinet position trying to govern his people, that he was truly a revolutionary at heart. So he leaves there and goes to the Congo with Castro's blessing and some of his finances and some of his army, his men. But he goes to the fight because he was fighting for justice everywhere, and ended up losing his life in Bolivia as a result of his continued commitment to being a revolutionary and fighting injustice everywhere. To me, that's tremendous self-awareness. How many people in today's world believe after they've gone through one violent revolution and achieve what they felt was the goal, the victory, and then say, I'm not satisfied. I still have to go out here and fight in revolutions. I don't have a personal stake in it, but just because I recognize that human beings are suffering and I'm a human, I'm going to act. So today I want to lift up Che Guevara in that respect.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. I apologize that there might have been, I don't know if you heard it or not, there was a pop-up that made music on my computer.
I didn't.
Okay, I shouldn't have told you that. I could have gotten away with it. So yeah, I wondered, 2 people that I've just become aware of, and I don't know a lot about them, but I heard a brief 2.5-minute clip of them talking, and it's the family. I don't know if it's 2 brothers or a brother and a brother-in-law of Renee Good, the woman that was shot 3 times in the face by a federal agent in Minneapolis. and they testified in front of Congress. And we talk about becoming more fully human. You could feel and see their grief in what happened to their sister or sister-in-law. Again, I forget it was two brothers or a brother and a brother-in-law. I need to check that. But their level of composure, of truth telling, of giving the rest of us a sense of who she was throughout her life, beyond these brief clips we see of her telling one agent, it's cool, I'm not angry at you, and then beginning to drive away and then being shot 3 times. They just did it's kind of, there's a side of me, a younger side of me, that wants the fist pounding, enraged against the injustice kind of response, and then I believe there's still a time and a place for that in certain moments in our lives. But these two guys just showed up as adults, contrary to Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and Stephen Miller and Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance and all the other people who responded after she was shot and called her names. These two guys brought to the table this deep humanity for someone that they loved. And even if she had violated some law and needed to be arrested for something, this is me saying this, they didn't say this, there's nothing that justified what the agent did. Holding his videotaping in one hand, his gun in the other, and he puts 3 in this woman's face, to put it as bluntly as possible. Just a really beautifully sad, grief-stricken, fully human testimony on the killing of their sister/sister-in-law. So I just really want to hold them up. And I'm sure there's longer pieces of the testimony that are available. I only saw a brief clip this morning on the Washington Post, and I'm going to go look for more later to more fully inform myself.
Absolutely. Gratitude for sharing. So that's going to wrap up our show for today. This has been Healing America's Narrative. Again, I'm your host, King, and this has been my host, Reggie. And we hope that you all get some value out of this. And until next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, let's all continue to look for ways to become more fully human. Thank you.